Hey there, Tony DeWitt here. I'm a retired Missouri attorney now living my best life on a beach in Florida. I offer content and commentary on current events in the law as well as some general legal topics, but I do not dispense legal advice by video. With that understanding out of the way, here's what we're discussing today. So today we're in the Natalie Cochran murder trial out of West Virginia. And first, a little backstory. In 2019, Michael Cochran died. At the time that he died, he was in hospice, which normally indicates that you have some kind of serious medical condition that is terminal. But after his death, his wife began to be suspected because it was somewhat of a suspicious death. Then in 2021, federal prosecutors said that Natalie Cochran persuaded people to invest in her business as well as phony government contracts by making false misrepresentations about her company's experience and success as a government contractor. They called it a Ponzi scheme. Cochran convinced at least 11 people to invest about close to $2.5 million in contracts that were government contracts, according to a news release from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Cochran never invested the money she received, but instead she put it into her personal and business bank accounts. Cochran admitted to using investor funds to make numerous purchases over a $10,000 level. That included withdrawing more than $37,500 to purchase a 1965 Shelby Cobra. She was sentenced to 135 months in federal prison after she pleaded guilty to those allegations in 2021. Then, back in 2023, the Raleigh County prosecuting attorney, Ben Hatfield, told the media that Natalie, a pharmacist now serving 11 years in prison for that Ponzi scheme, was being re-indicted for the first-degree murder of her husband, Michael. The case had previously been dismissed. It was re-indicted because there was a subsequent exhumation of Michael Cochran's body that summer. A forensic pathologist, Paul Uribe, a forensic pathologist out of Texas, he did an examination and issued a formal opinion that the manner of death was homicide and that the cause of death was the introduction of exogenous insulin into the decedent's system. And of course, that exogenous insulin had not been prescribed. Now, I'm diabetic. I wear an insulin pump. I take insulin every day, and I can tell you that when you take too much insulin, you feel awful. But it doesn't mimic the flu. It doesn't mimic some kind of viral illness. What it feels like is that somebody has just shoved a tube into you and sucked all of your energy out, and you're weak as a kitten. And if you don't get sugar pretty quickly into your systems, you can have seizures, you can essentially collapse, and if you don't get medical treatment quickly, it can lead to brain death. Now, when you hear the word insulin, you immediately think of a prescription drug. And you would imagine that in order to obtain that drug, you'd need to go to a doctor and get a prescription and take it to a pharmacy to get that drug. But that's not right. The fact is that you can go down to your local Walmart and ask for a bottle of Novolin N or Novolin R, and you don't have to have any prescription at all for that. While certain brands of insulin do require a prescription, others do not. And the theory is that people who are diabetic need access to insulin, and it isn't always convenient to force them to go to a doctor first. That's especially true when people are in a low-income situation. The allegations in the Cochran case are different than that, though. Cochran was a pharmacist. She had access to almost any amount of insulin she needed. While some of those substances were controlled, others were not. But if Natalie Cochran is a murderer, she may be one of the dumbest murderers ever. High concentrations of insulin can be detected even after death, and that seems to be what happened here with Cochran. Worse, she borrowed insulin from a friend because she said she had high blood sugar. But at any rate, that is the allegation that triggered the investigation into the death of Michael Cochran. Several days ago, the case opened up in West Virginia with opening statements. I had been meaning to get to this, but I've been busy with other things. I have rarely seen a prosecutor do a good opening statement in the way that I would do it. Why do I say that? Well, here's why. Watch how the prosecutor in this part of the opening statement uses rhetorical questions to get the jury thinking about different issues in the case.
On February the 5th of 2019, Michael Cochran was a 200-pound, healthy 38-year-old man. By midday of February 6th of 2019, he had lost consciousness and he would never regain consciousness. He died in hospice care 5 days later, February 11th of 2019. How could this happen? Why did it happen? For an answer to that, look no further than this defendant's conduct. As you were told, the state has no direct evidence, the kind of stuff that makes TV shows exciting, the kind of stuff prosecutors love, jurors love. There is no DNA. There is no evidence of fingerprints. There are no videos of what happened. But as Judge Kirkpatrick will instruct you at the end of this, circumstantial evidence is just as valid as that type of direct and scientific evidence. And there is a ton of evidence of this defendant's guilt. All circumstantial. So how did this happen? How did this healthy 38-year-old man go into a state of unconsciousness and never come back from that? On the morning of February 6th of 2019, this defendant advised her friend and neighbor, Jennifer Davis, that she had been sick all night, 103-degree temperature. And she had previously advised that she had cancer and was under chemo treatment. And that chemo treatment, the effects of which were somewhat negated by insulin. There were no diabetics in the Cochran house. And there's no evidence that this defendant was taking insulin to counteract anything. But Jennifer Davis, being a good friend and the mother of a child who was a severe diabetic, had insulin. The defendant knew that. Jennifer Davis, being a good friend, sends her husband with insulin to the defendant's house that morning. About noonish, one way or the other, Michael Cochran collapses in the Cochran house kitchen. Now, the defendant gives various versions of what she saw, what she heard, and what she did, but there's no question that he was unconscious by about 12:20 or so. How do we know that? She took a picture of him and sent that picture to a number of people, showing him in a collapsed state in their kitchen. Did she call 911? No. Did she load him into a car and take him to the yard? No. What did she do? She called 2 construction guys that worked for her. They took Michael Cochran from the kitchen floor and put him on the couch, where he would remain for the rest of the day, some at least 6 hours or so. That's an unusual reaction for somebody to take with their spouse. She did, in addition to calling the construction workers, you'll hear from him, Jason Bowen, who helped move Mr. Cochran to the couch. She called a trooper friend of theirs, J.D. Hamilton. J.D. Hamilton came to the Cochran residence. He saw Michael on the couch. Michael was not conscious, and he was concerned. J.D. Hamilton is married to Stephanie Hamilton, and she is a physician's assistant. They get some medical attention. Stephanie Hamilton came to the house. She looks at Michael Cochran, and she tells her he needs to be checked. Did the defendant do that? No.
Well, you saw that throughout that, and even there at the end. He was asking those rhetorical questions. Why are they so important? It's because when you get asked a question and you have a normal human brain, you immediately try to think of an answer. You may not even have to try to think, it may just come to you. If I were to ask you, how do you like this video so far? Your brain would probably provide you an answer even if you didn't ask it. So you're probably thinking, well, I like it, or wow, this is really boring. Whatever it is you think. And you think that because you're asked a question. So that's because our minds are associating machines and we reach these decisions in microseconds about stuff like that. That's why it's very easy with questions to lead people down a path to let them discover the answer on their own. When you ask them questions and lead them down this path, and they reach the conclusion, you don't force it on them, that decision is more powerful than if you come to them and say, look, this woman killed this guy and this is how she did it. Because in the former case, you're asking them to solve a mystery, and in the latter case, you're just telling them a story. So I think it's a very effective way to open a prosecution. I think the prosecutor did a really good job there. Now let's contrast that with the defense's opening. The lawyer is a guy by the name of Matthew Victor who has 34 years experience in criminal law. But Perry Mason, he is not.
May it please the court, counsel for the state. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, by the prosecution's account, and perhaps by some other accounts, Natalie Cochran is not a nice person. She defrauded friends, relatives, investors. She was involved in a Ponzi scheme. She cheated, she scammed. And she has paid for it. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the fact that she is perhaps a fraud and perhaps a cheat, and that you wouldn't perhaps want to invite her home for Sunday dinner, that you wouldn't like her, does not translate into being a murderer. This trial is not a forum on public acceptance. You don't have to like her. You don't have to say she is a great person. But you have taken the oath to judge her fairly and to give her a fair shake, a fair trial. When you took the oath, it's not just some wave of a hand. It is a solemn oath to search for the truth and to determine what really happened in this case. Now, the prosecutor presented a very nice theory, except that before we do that, again, I'm Matthew Victor. I represent Natalie Cochran with my co-counsel, Mr. Stanley Selden. We represent somebody, again, who is perhaps dishonest in her financial dealings, but who didn't kill anybody, let alone her husband, her only man in her life. A man, the father of her 2 children, and a man with whom she was enamored ever since she laid eyes on him in high school. She's not a murderer, as the evidence will show. Now, she is accused here by the state of West Virginia of one of the vilest crimes there is known. And I will submit to you that the state's motive in this case, as they presented to you, is absolute nonsense. The state of West Virginia is trying to tell you that my client, Natalie Cochran, who has lived with a man who was up to his eyeballs in the Ponzi scheme, somehow detected that he was on her. He was already detecting that she was committing a major fraud, and he was going to run straight to the federal government. Well, think about it, ladies and gentlemen, as you listen to the evidence.
Now, the prosecution opening was plain and direct, and it recognized there were no fancy DNA evidence or videos to show. And you acknowledged the warts on your case at the beginning because you don't want the other guy to point them out. Now, Mr. Victor followed suit by saying that Natalie wasn't someone you'd invite over for Sunday dinner, unless, of course, you're having a Sunday dinner in the chow hall at a federal prison. Now, I hate to pick on accents or mannerisms because it looks small and petty, and I mean the man no disrespect here, but his style and delivery here is apt to turn off jurors. I think he made a good point about the fact that Michael Cochran likely knew about the Ponzi scheme, but just because the state might be off base on the motive doesn't mean they're off base on the murder. Connecting with a jury is a difficult thing. You need rapport with them. If I were on that jury, I wouldn't be thinking about whether she was innocent or guilty. I'd be thinking, how long am I going to have to listen to this guy? If you feel differently, let me know. If you think I'm off base, let me know. If you think I'm being unfair, let me know. I am just looking at this from a fresh perspective, and I can say that the chance of an acquittal here is fairly small. That's especially true here, where a pharmacist knows precisely what insulin does, how it's used as a poison, and how easy it is to get in quantity. While I believe there are plenty of things the defense will be able to pick apart, I don't necessarily think those things are going to be critical. There's good forensic evidence of the murder, and I doubt very seriously if this defendant had the ability to bring its own experts and evaluate the forensics done by the Texas pathologist. Add to that the fact that the woman is a convicted felon, that she was convicted for fraud, that fraud is essentially lying for profit, and thus, if the defense is representing her, it must be simply be championing her fraud. I would not want to have the defense in this case. And no, I don't think the defense is actually championing her fraud. I think the defense is trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, and that's very difficult to do. This is going to be a short video today because I have some other things I need to look at, some requests from viewers to look at issues and do videos on them. So I wanted to keep this short. And that's what I have for you today. Thanks for watching my video. If you have a request for me to cover a topic, please send me an email to the address above, and in the subject line put video request. If you have comments, drop them in the comments down below. If you found the content worthy, please consider subscribing. Since I started doing this work, I have always asked listeners to consider doing just one kind thing every day to make somebody else smile or make their life better in some way. Please consider doing that. It makes the world a better place. Now, YouTube has some suggestions for other videos of mine you may find interesting.